This is a timeline presenting the evolution and the notable characters in the story of psychology. Nowadays, we can define psychology as the science of mental life, in which the psychologists have to learn to listen, to talk, to learn to analyze and understand profiles, use tests to predict experiences, and projective tests.
The ancient psychology thought that it was the study of the soul, but nowadays the psychology is the science of behavior and mental process. It can be divided in three: the ancient psychology, middle age psychology, and the modern psychology. In the psychology, there are different types of observations. One of them can be the behavioral observations, when the people may behave different in such settings. The laboratory research, that are observations that are made in a laboratory. The naturalistic observations, that observe and see behavior in an environmental area. And there are also many methods in the psychology to gather all the information, like for example the self-reports, that it can include interviews, questionnaires, and diaries. The psychology empirism is based on experience. France member detailed his cure for some mental illness. Philippe Pirnel released the first mental patients from confinement in the first massive movement.
Well, first of all, I want to talk about the cognitive psychology, the behavioral psychology, developmental psychology, and the neuropsychology. First, we're going to talk about what is the cognitive psychology. Cognitive psychology focuses on understanding the mental process of how people think. Also, in the problem solving, the decision making, language, intelligence, and attention are just a few of the topics studied by cognitive psychologists. Cognitive psychologists often use an information processing model to describe how the mind works, suggesting that the brain stores and processes information much like a computer. Now we are going to focus on the behavioral psychology. Behavioral psychology maintains that behavior is both conditioned and determined by its own outcomes or consequences. Human behavior can be understood by investigating animal behavior. Only the observable and measurable aspects of a behavior are worth investigating. Now we pass to the developmental psychology. Developmental psychology is the scientific study of how and why human beings change over the course of their life, originally concerned with infants and children. The field has expanded to include adolescence, adult development, aging, and the entire lifespan. Now we are going to talk about the neuropsychology. Neuropsychology studies the structure and function of the brain as they relate to specific psychological processes and behaviors. It is an experimental field of psychology that aims to understand how behavior and cognition are influenced by brain functioning and is concerned with the diagnosis and treatment of behavioral and cognitive effects of neurological disorders. Well, now that we've seen the first four types of psychology, now we are going to talk about the psychology of personality, the social psychology, clinical psychology, and the forensic psychology. First, we're going to talk about psychology of the personality. Personality psychology is one of the largest and most popular branches of psychology. Psychologists strive to understand how personality develops as well as how it influences the way we think and behave. This area of psychology seeks to understand personality and how it varies among individuals, as well as how people are similar in terms of personality. While there is no single agreed upon definition of personality, it is often thought of as something that arises from within the individual and remains fairly consistent throughout life. Now we are going to talk about the social psychology. The social psychology is the study of the manner in which the personality, attitudes, motivations, and behavior of the individual influence or are influenced by social groups. Now we are going to pass to the clinical psychology. The clinical psychology, the branch of psychology dealing with the diagnosis and treatment of the personality and behavioral disorders. This means that the clinical psychology is when they are helping and treating the patient. Now, for the last, we're going to talk about the forensic psychology. Forensic psychology is the interaction of the practice or study of psychology and the law. Psychologists interested in this line of applied work may be found working in prisons, jails, rehabilitation centers, police departments, law firms, schools, government agencies, or in private practice, to name a few. They may work directly with attorneys, defendants, offenders, victims, pupils, families, or with patients within the state's corrections or rehabilitation centers. Thank you for your attention.
After years of evolution, and through the pass of the years and the notable characters in psychology's history, scientists determined that psychology is the science of the mind and the study of mental processes.